Hello, my name is Jesse Willie, and this is the commentary for Did I Get What I Paid For? Season 2, Episode 10, in which I review the Disney movie Dumbo. I want to talk a little bit about this series and this particular episode because it was a very difficult one to shoot for a wide variety of reasons. And to really get started, I have to explain why we did Dumbo to begin with. Back in season 0 and 1, I had a lot of help from a lot of people, and I wasn't really in a position to pay them. But since a lot of my friends who were helping me were fans of the show, I decided to give them something special. I was gonna let them pick what movies I reviewed for a majority of season 2 and unfortunately going into season 3. I was gonna do all of their movies this year, but let's just say they abused their privileges and most of them chose things that were extremely painful, and I couldn't put up with that much cinematic torture in 1 year. So I opted to do a few things that I wanted to do. But why did I do Dumbo in particular? Well, some people would out and out tell me what movies they wanted me to do. My friend Nick, who's the voice of Nick the Computer, he told me he wanted Ice Pirates. Other people were a little bit more vague. Marche Hall, who is the voice of Xylogaphia and a few other minor characters, told me that she wanted me to do a movie that frightened me when I was a child. Yeah, the whole story I tell about being scared of Dumbo when I was a little kid, that is absolutely true. And I just borrowed from a real life experience when I worked it into the sketch. Now, I want to talk about this first location we're shooting in because, well, I decided to shoot it in the front yard. Part of that was for the reason I say in the sketch, in that my dad was remodeling the basement where I usually shoot. But I was also trying to reference the original Jack and the Beanstalk episode that I did last season. And that's why you get a few callbacks like the magic beans and putting Hen Wen in a box. And the reason I did Mickey and the Beanstalk along with Dumbo was that the entire reason that Dumbo frightened me was that when I first saw it on TV as a little kid, it was packaged with Mickey and the Beanstalk. But because football went over that week, they cut the Wonderful World of Disney in half, and they played Dumbo from the end of Pink Elephants on Parade to the end of the movie the next week. So I really was terrified for the fate of Dumbo for a week. And when you're 3 years old, a week seems like forever. Another reason I wanted to talk about the location was that it is really hard shooting outside when you have very primitive equipment. I don't have a good microphone that I can just put on and filter out background noises like cars or helicopters or planes or people's lawnmowers. So what I had to do was I had to shoot as much of the outside stuff as I could, send it to my friend Matt, and have him do a whole lot of audio work on it because he's got all this sorts of equipment because he's a musician. You'll hear a little bit of music he and I did in the recap segment of this episode. But yeah, he's a whiz at doing that kind of stuff. Ah, yes, the Frosty Bear Show segment. This was not originally going to be in this episode. I had it loosely plotted to be in part 1 of the season finale, which is going to cover Star Trek Enterprise. But what happened was, when I recorded this scene the first time, I had bumped a button on the camera that locked the visual. So while I was recording my dialogue, it was just holding that still shot of Ralph and Xylo in the cardboard box. And I couldn't use it. A few days later, I went out and reshot, and the image was good, but the audio was really choppy and not good. I mean, I mentioned before that Matt is a bit of a wizard at audio magic, but it was at a point where I didn't think he could fix it. So I took the loose outline I had, wrote it, and shot it, and then just put as many filters as I could up on some of the visuals that I had to make it look like I planned it to be a choppy, distorted image. When really I hadn't, I'm just being lazy. I wanted to talk about this image here, with the stork in Mandalorian armor carrying Dumbo, because it has a very interesting story behind it. You see, Matt and I have this little group we're in where we get together and riff on bad movies. And it was his turn to buy lunch and dinner. But he didn't have the money, so he borrowed some from me. A few weeks later, I wrote this script, and I had this line about, well, this guy sure no Mandalorian. And I thought it'd be funny if we could find somebody to draw the stork in armor and all that. And I couldn't find anyone. And then I asked, wait a minute, his sister Katie draws really, really well. Back in college, I was briefly the editor of the comics section of the college newspaper, and she did one of the comic strips for me. So I asked if she'd be willing to do it, and he said, well, she would need $10, but yeah. I said, well, remember that $60 you borrowed? Well, you owe me $50 and you owe her $10. And he's like, okay. And that's how we got it. Okay, now I want to talk about the episode itself. Because this episode, as I said, was very difficult on every level. Normally, I have no trouble writing a script for an episode and then going in and shooting it. Okay, the shooting part, I often have trouble, but the writing process, not so much. However, I remembered Dumbo being racially problematic, but it was much, much, much worse than I remembered. And so I was worried about crossing a line of good taste. And if you've watched some of my previous episodes, you know I'm not exactly someone known for pulling their punches. But in this case, I felt that I had to. So I messaged Marche and asked if she would be willing to do for me what Richard Pryor did for Mel Brooks when they were making Blazing Saddles, which is to just check the script over, go over every joke with a fine-tooth comb, and make sure that I wasn't being over the top and or accidentally racist. And yeah, there were a few points where she said, yeah, this joke has got to go, but not as many as I thought. I mean, I thought I was going to have to rewrite and scrap the whole thing. There were also places where she told me, I see what you're going for, but you're not hitting it hard enough, which is the exact opposite of what I was expecting. I guess I might have gone a little too soft because I was trying to avoid being just as problematic as the movie. Not that being sensitive is a bad thing, especially considering what's been going on in the news right now. Yeah, being sensitive is good, but sugarcoating it so that you don't say what needs to be said, that's not so good. Yeah, I didn't want to offend anyone, but this was a case where by trying to do that, I'd end up doing the review itself a disservice, and I'd piss a few people off. And if I was gonna piss someone off, no matter what I did, I would rather piss off the right people. The people who are being complete fat hats. Because as I say in the video itself, when your joke attacks someone who is worse off than yourself, that's a punch down. That is a comedian's cardinal sin. When you try to use your joke to defend the defenseless, that's a punch up. That's good. That is what good comedy is supposed to do. So I really wanted to thank Marche for doing that. This episode was going to be a nightmare to write, no matter what, but her input made it possible. And it made me a lot more comfortable in figuring out what it was I wanted to say and the best way for me to say it. Another really big difficulty with this episode were some of the background images. Most of the time, I just put my DVD into the computer and take the screenshot button and use it to grab stills right off the movie that way. But you don't have that ability when you watch a video on Disney+. And I tried to get Dumbo on DVD from the local library just so I could do that. But I waited and waited and waited and it never came. So the reason you don't have as many stills from the movie this time is that I was pretty limited. I could only use the ones I was able to find by doing a basic Google search. Yeah, this is another weird patch. I originally did not have the shot of power pachyderms here. In fact, my original idea was to actually dig out my copy of Power Pachyderms and pull it out of nowhere on set, but as I said, this day was already running long, and I really didn't want to waste the time looking for it. Then I thought about putting the still up the same way it is here, but I couldn't find a good image for it. Then when I got the video back from audio cleaning from Matt, he had added it, along with that picture of the poster from Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, which, both of those images I had considered adding, but then said, nah, they're not really needed. But since he went to the trouble of getting them, I was like, oh, what the hell. The next thing I should talk about, since we have a little bit of time, is that romance between Ralph and Xylo and where that came from. Because it was not really planned. What happened was that a lot of my regular viewers thought the character just somehow worked. And even the people who were first or second time viewers thought that they wanted to see this character more. So I had to come up with a way that a winter elf could show up when it wasn't winter and have it be believable. Then there was a little bit of serendipity on the set. I was trying to set them up on the couch, and because the doll that I use for Xylo has legs, but they're basically hollow, flat pieces of fabric, like a rag doll, she wouldn't stand up properly. Ralph usually stands up on his own as long as I don't bump him, so I just put him there and basically held her in place. And while watching the version in tests, I noticed that it looked like they were getting a little cozy. I ran it by Marche and she thought it was funny. My original idea was that it was going to be Ralph with a schoolboy crush. But then I saw that my next episode was going to be Galaxy Quest. And I remembered that scene where Tony Shalhoub makes out with the girl who turns into an octopus. And it gave me an opportunity to comment on the film. And so I decided to do at least one version of that scene where I had Ralph and Xylo making out and have me purposely not responding to it. And in the end, Marche and I both thought that version of the script was funnier than the original take. So I kept it in. Then I wrote their first date as one of the post-credit sequences on the Galaxy Quest episode, and again, it's kind of sweet there. But then you get to this episode, and you see Ralph sort of pushing me away to go on his date, and then when he comes back later, well, you'll see. There are times when jokes get longer and longer in Snowball, and a lot of that has to do with the way that the sketches tend to be recorded. Most of the time, I write the script, I shoot it, and then a few days later, Nick and Marche or whoever else needs to be in the episode will meet on Zoom and do a recording. And sometimes you'll notice that I'll have a line and I'm not on screen. And that's because I'm responding to usually one of Nick's improvs, but Marche has gotten one or two in there from time to time. And I'm just too lazy, or the set isn't available for me to do a reshoot. So it's better to just have me off camera. Not like in this episode where I just had the camera go crazy or the audio around me just be garbled due to living a quarter of a mile from an active construction site. But there was a case where when I do that bit about if only I had some sort of AI assistant, I couldn't decide which one of the takes of Nick's to use, so I just went ahead and used all of them. This is the place where Marche's input became the most valuable. I had a bunch of jokes here that didn't quite work, and I knew they didn't work. I thought I was being too hard. Marche thought I was pulling my punches a bit too much. But every time I tried to fix it, it went too far one way or the other. So I really asked her if there was really any joke I could do there. I mean, I knew other white people could do something there, but my ADD makes me a tad impulsive, and I knew I was going to screw it up if I tried. So somehow I settled on that itself being the joke, and that, I think, works really well. This rant about pink elephants on parade was originally going to be a lot longer than it was, because that was going to be the crux of why I chose this movie, that it frightened me when I was a kid. And I really wanted to delve into just how frightening that was for a child, but it was hard to do that and make it funny, so I cut it down, which is actually good because the past few episodes ran a little long, and I know the Enterprise episodes are going to be super long when I get to them. I've written the first part of Enterprise already, and it's 18 pages, and each page is about 2 to 3 minutes of screen time. So yeah, keeping this one under 36 minutes was a must for me. People wanted to know if there was any significance to the t-shirt I'm wearing in this episode, and I have to say yes and no. No, because when I got out of the shower on the day I was recording, I had 2 clean shirts. One was a plain red t-shirt, and the other one was this one. Now, I knew that when I got to the rant, which I was going to shoot on the 3rd day, that I had that line, I'm not saying no white person can criticize racist works like Dumbo. I wanted to make a little sly reference to the type of person who could do that sort of thing. And if anyone could, it would have been Samuel Clemens, who spent his whole life finding his own racial biases and doing his best to eliminate them. Then again, Clemens had the same impulsiveness problem I did, probably even worse, considering that in his own autobiography, he admits that his wife used to give him little index cards, basically, to help him point out when he was being rude or how to read social cues when he was at dinner parties. And now just a little brief thing on this post-credit sequence. this whole arc with Donatello and time travel and the whole multiverse thing is spoofing not only the string of multiverse movies that were coming out this year, but also the whole time travel plot that I started a little bit last season that really exploded with the Quantum Leap episode earlier this season. It's going to play a huge part of the Enterprise 3-parter, and possibly, I'm not saying one way or the other, but it could have a big impact on Season 3. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell your friends about this channel. Share the video. Do whatever you gotta do to let the algorithm know we exist. I'm Jess, and I'll see you soon.